Hey guys, I'm at LegalTech with Amy. Amy, say hi.
Hi.
Amy and I have been teaching others, whether in person or on YouTube, and we have different approaches to it. I have been working on the vendor side, and Amy, you've been
Most
working.
of my experiences on the law firm side.
So we have different priorities and the way we look at things when we educate others. So the situation we want to talk about, let's say a new person starts working in your department. However, you don't get to train that person. I know it could be very frustrating. So somebody else trains that person, and for whatever reason, you happen to have an opportunity to spend 3 minutes with that person, and you want to give them absolutely essential tips for success in ediscovery. So we want to talk about maybe 3 or 4 things that we would tell that person as in as condensed version as possible. Sounds good?
Yep.
First thing I tell people is miss no data. Very important. Make sure you account for every single piece of data you touch. What happens is you get 10 PSTs to process, you point to a folder, you hit process, it gets in the system, you say done, and you go away. What could have happened is somebody opened up one of the PSTs in Outlook and it got locked. And now one of the PSTs is missing.
So one thing that I always teach is that you want to be careful when you're copying the data. You want to make sure you're using the right tools to copy the data, to transfer it from one location to another. For instance, from the hard drive you received it from to the server that you're copying it to in your office. You want to use the right tool to make sure you're not changing any metadata, but then you also want to watch the file counts to make sure that you start with a file count and end with a file count.
Don't miss the tiniest piece of data. Make sure everything is accounted for.
One of the problems with a newbie is that they need to be able to stand up to the attorneys, and they need to have confidence when they're doing that. So one topic that is a struggle for is preparing productions. And productions are usually done in waves, so you're producing every 2 weeks, for instance. You need to take the date that the production is going to go out the door and backtrack from there. So for instance, you need time to QC the production once you get it back from the service provider. The service provider needs time to accurately prepare the production. So for instance, I give myself a half day to do the QC. I give the service provider 3 days to prepare a production. And then, backtrack a little bit more, you have to tell the review team or the lead associate who's QCing the production set that they have to be finished by a certain date in order for you to get it to the service provider. So it's backtracking, but it's managing expectations. You have to be clear on why you're asking them to stop at a certain date, and then getting it to the service provider. And the service providers love getting enough time to do it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I see how your tips are completely different from the people who work on the vendor side. You guys have to plan the productions. We have to make sure we get the production done,
Right.
And I certainly appreciate you giving us enough time to.
Yeah, because there could be things that go wrong or questions you have.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Don't produce privileged information. Under any circumstances, nothing that is privileged ever should go out. If something is tagged privileged, do not include it in the production. Obviously, you have to make sure that it's not there. Anything that's redacted, you have to make sure redactions are burned in. They're being re-OCR'd. Once you export production, you go in and you double and you triple check text files to make sure what was redacted has actually been
Yeah, the
blanked
text is no
out.
longer there. Yeah.
Yes, and if there are native files, make sure those are not included in the production, because that would of course defeat the purpose of redacting them.
Yeah, there's a lot of steps. You need to have a checklist actually to make sure that you're going through all the steps, getting ready for make sure that when you're preparing a production, one of the steps of making sure you don't produce privileged documents is to have a checklist of all the QC steps
Exactly.
that you do. You know, there's a
Yes.
bunch of searches, different search combinations that we run against the tagging to make sure that we're getting the families and not, there's also inconsistent families. You have to deal with that before you send the production out the door. So
Absolutely.
yeah.
But the worst mistake you can make, even if you miss half the documents in the production, it's okay. You can make a supplemental volume.
Yep.
But if you produce something that's privileged, oh boy,
they can't unsee it.
you're in trouble.
Yep.
Yes. And the last item I have, if you see something, say something. Just like NYPD says, right? So, so many times I've seen where people just
Don't speak up.
plow on through the job and they just follow in the steps. And I actually have been guilty of that a couple of times where I was preparing a print job, and I noticed that a couple of files were a little bit fuzzy, a little soft. I'm like, yeah, that looks okay. Just keep going. And the client was like yelling, we need it now.
Yeah.
And I kind of went through with it. I set it up for printing. I sent it on. And what I didn't realize to do is I should have went back to the original documents and looked at those to make sure, are they also a little fuzzy or they're not? What turned out in that case is somebody decided to PDF documents in batch on a medium setting, making everything a little softer.
Yeah.
And so the client, of course, called back and says, like, what, something doesn't look sharp here.
Yeah.
And what I should have done is I should have looked at the original data, or if one of my people were working on it, they should have said something to me or to a project manager, like, hey, something doesn't look right. Are you sure we're doing the right thing?
So another example of that would be when one of your project managers, a project manager on the service provider side, gets a request from somebody like me on the law firm side. You get the request, you look it over, and then you don't just take orders. You use your consulting skills, and you'd have enough confidence to push back and say, you know what, I think you missed something, or would you consider doing this a different way? This is why I suggest you do it a different way. So speak up, like you said.
Yes, speak up, absolutely. Extremely important.
Yep.
All right, Amy, thank you very much for your tips.
It was good seeing
Very
you,
helpful.
Nikolai.
Good seeing you.